welcome to United Opposition with Scott and Marshall, you've changed a little bit. Okay, well, we're going to talk about what happened. Here we go. Well, hey, this is still United Opposition with Scott and Marshall. Marshall couldn't make it just today. He's going to be back. So I asked Mike to step in. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm good. And if Marshall's out there watching, I just hope that I do him at least a little bit of justice.
A little bit.
Maybe. Hopefully he doesn't get mad at me.
Try your best not to insult him.
Oh, I will not. I would never insult him. No.
Well, hey, tell us about Covenant Coffee. Tell us about what we have
All
here.
right. So Covenant Coffee, longtime sponsor of 511 Media Group and all of our shows. Hope in a Cup. So this run by Randy Martin. They just opened up a new place right across the street from us, which we've been having all of our meetings there.
Nice.
They're Cloud 9 by Covenant Coffee.
Yep.
And so that what they do is they work with emancipated foster youth and provide them jobs, life skills, help them get up on their feet, because a lot of times the emancipated foster youth are the people that everyone forgets about. They're the ones with the statistics, the drug abuse, the gangs, the suicide.
It's that transition from being taken care of by a foster family to being out on your own.
Well, they've lived such a rough life growing up. Like, a lot of them, and I've talked to some of them, they feel like nobody cared about them growing up. So Randy's really doing and even if someone did care about them, it's hard because you almost feel rejected. You know? But Randy's doing a great job with those guys. So go check them out, covenantcoffee.org. They're over on North Chester or right across the street here at Mohawk, California. That's
right. And we have to do. I don't know if you're going to do it as well as I do.
I won't do it as well as you do.
We have to do our ASMR there for Covenant Coffee. Here we go.
I got it that time.
There you go. Well, hey, we were going to continue. Marshall and I were going to continue talking about capitalism and communism, but Marshall couldn't be here today. So I wanted to. We're calling this like an interlude or Josh, you remind me, what did I tell you we're going to call it? An intermission?
Yeah, he said intermission.
Intermission, yeah, a little intermission. And I wanted to kind of take this time to share why Marshall and I really kind of developed this, kind of the history of where we came from with this podcast and how the podcast came into being. I obviously don't want to be talking for Marshall because he's not here, but definitely want to respect, I'll just kind of explain what happened and why we feel this is important. But I wanted to be able to talk to somebody about
it makes it a little bit easier when you have dialogue too, right?
Yes.
Versus a monologue. And I don't know if you've ever done that. Well, you do it all the time. So
preaching, it's called preaching.
It's a little bit different.
Right? Yeah, it's a little bit different, but just wanted to share. It just kind of started with I like debating. It's funny. I wasn't actually in debate when I was in high school, but I enjoy kind of arguing and debating and kind of getting in there. And the early 2000s, when that became an internet thing, right? You could debate online. And what was that meme? It shows this guy typing on the computer and the wife's saying, "Come to bed." It's like, no, there's somebody wrong on the internet. That was me. I was the person who was like finding those places to talk and argue. And what was funny is that at the time I was making short films for Star Wars because I'm a big Star Wars fan and my family is all Star Wars fans. And I was making lightsaber videos for a competition and stuff like that. But I was always incorporating scripture into the videos, incorporating a biblical story or something like that. The inner turmoil of the.
You're gonna share some of those, Scott.
I will share some of those. Some of those are on my YouTube and they're on there. But what was really cool is that the creative community that's out there, in Hollywood and people who are artists are typically more on the left than they are on the right.
Yeah.
And so being in that community, there was a lot of pushback on my views and stuff like that. And there were places online where you could talk and everything. And there were forums. You remember internet forums?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Internet forums.
Yeah. I'm not that much younger than you, Scott.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you have like the internet forums where you could go on and talk and everything like that and type and where you have those arguments. And I would go on there and there was always this one spot where you could go where it's the only place you could go to talk about religion and politics and stuff like that.
Your little corner.
That little corner. Yeah. You could go over there on the forums. They left that one. If you did it anywhere else, the moderators would kick you out, but over there, yeah, just go crazy. And I discovered something. I grew up a Christian. I grew up in a Christian home. and with that viewpoint, and just surrounded by, I was 4 years old when my father found Christ. And so we started going to church, and that's just what I grew up with children's church and Christian. I was, I didn't even go to youth group. I like going to the main service and listening to the pastor speak and stuff like that. And so that was all my input. And then suddenly here I was 20 something years old, engaging with people that I had never really engaged with before. People who had beliefs other than me. And a lot of them had a history of Christianity, because a lot of them were Christians at one point and got hurt by the church.
Yeah.
And actually there was
sometimes by their parents.
By their parents in the church.
But
and so actually this past Sunday at our church, our service, Pastor Bart had a message where he's talking about that. And it was a great moment, because he's talking about how he liked, there's certain foods he didn't like. He didn't like sauerkraut, and his wife.
Really? I love sauerkraut.
His wife loves sauerkraut. And so he was talking about how, no, I'm not going to do it. She's like, no, just try this. And so he's like, fine. And she made it for him. And he's like, it was good. And he realized, and he turn this point around, says, some of you, God has been trying to give you something. God has been trying to put something in your life, and you've been saying, no, I don't like it. I don't like it. And he's saying, some of you are rejecting what God has for you because there was someone in your life who didn't serve it to you correctly.
Wow. That's a good word.
Right? I was
That's hitting me right now.
I'm like, whoa, that just like, it hit me. And I realized that a lot of these people, that's how they see Christianity.
Yeah.
Is through people who claim to be Christians, or people who were Christians who hurt them, who didn't act Christ-like. And that's the flavor they got of Christianity. And so here I was online engaging with these people who were, a lot of them, hurt by Christianity, who grew up and rejected what they learned as kids. And of course, once you get into college age, there's a lot of questioning when you get into college, and professors are actively trying to get you to not
indoctrinate you
and not, and not believe the things that you grew up believing. And I remember, so I'm dealing with these people, I'm talking with these people, but I'm realizing their humanity. It's so easy to be that keyboard warrior. To the person on the other side of the screen is the enemy. The person on the other side of the screen, they're just dumb. They're just stupid. They're just evil. They want to burn America. They want to, take over your children. They want to kill babies. Like, it's like, that's what you think the other side is. And I found myself engaging with these people, with people that I never would have engaged with before, and realizing they're humans. They're humans on that side. They just simply believe something different. And if you just think of them as the enemy, you'll never engage with them. And so I came to a point where I reconnected, because Marshall and I were friends since high school. We met, freshman year in high school. We hung out in high school, hung out in college. We would write short stories, and I was in photography, and he was helping me take, do pictures and stuff like that. And we were coming with all these really crazy, cool movie ideas and everything like that. And then, how time kind of separates us all. But the really cool thing is Facebook kind of brought us all back together. And we ended up connecting, like, gosh, I want to say 10 or 12 years ago now.
Okay.
And we would just meet up. And I found out at that time, he was a devout Catholic in high school. I found out that he had lost his faith, and he was an atheist when I connected with him again. And he was, on the left. Yeah. I'm on the right. He's on the left. I'm conservative. He's liberal. I was a pastor. He's an atheist. And we found ourselves as polar opposite as you could be, but we would meet for coffee and just talk. We would talk for 2 hours on stuff and just go back and forth. And we were like, we should record this. Like, we should make it to a podcast. We should be on the radio. Like, he and I both really believe, and he put it in a way that I thought was really cool. And that he said, he believes that if two people on opposite sides, if any two people who have opposing positions, if you just sit them down for several hours at a table and put some pizza and beer on the table, eventually the two of them will come up with a solution. Like, he really believes, and I like the way that he put that. And it's like, if you treat them like a human being, that's what I discovered when I was talking with him, because I would see his position. And I want to ask you about this, because he's new to you, but now you're seeing maybe a window into something that you haven't seen before, Mike. But he would have a position on something, and my brain would be like, well, that's just dumb. Yeah. But he's not dumb. I used to associate with, he thinks that evil people think that, but he's not evil.
Right.
So what's his perspective? Where is he coming from? Because I cannot believe that he's dumb or evil or any of these things. So how do I understand how did he get to this thinking? And being able to listen to him talk and listen to where he's coming from doesn't mean I agree with him.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that I don't think he's still wrong.
Right.
I needed to hear it from somebody and have a perspective like, okay, so that means if he's not evil and he's not dumb and he holds these positions, then probably other people hold these positions aren't dumb or evil either. How do we engage with them? How do I engage with them just like I'm engaging with him?
Well, it's hard because I try to understand the way they think sometimes, and both sides are in an echo chamber, right? And then
yes.
we talked about that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
I watched the Daily Wire, not the Daily Wire, the Daily Show, which is the exact opposite of the Daily Wire.
Yeah.
And the other night, and I was like, wow, okay, and it was so blatantly biased.
Yeah.
And then you watch Fox News, and that's, I'm sure, somewhat biased as well. Not as biased as I perceive the Daily Show to be.
Yeah.
But then like I'll spend sometimes like looking at CNN or going on Quora, and I'll kind of just like understand what these people think. And they're not trying to engage in dialogue either. It's just rhetoric and talking in memes, like you say. But but then when you get to a point where you're actually having a conversation with somebody, and they're your friend, right? Like I was talking about the guy like that I knew back when I was living in LA for a brief period of time, and he had very, very different viewpoint of me. But I was like, okay, well, but because we had somewhat of a relationship, I was like, well, I'm not going to try to fight this guy.
Yeah,
I'm just going to have a conversation. Like, okay, why do you think that? Why do you believe that way? What makes you, have that viewpoint, right? And obviously, part of it, this isn't the case with Marshall. I think it was for a while, but it isn't the case with Marshall anymore. Part of the other guy, and part of a lot of them, I think, is they don't have the Lord in their life, right? So that's going to be a slanted view just because of that, right? And we have a slanted view because we do have the Lord in our life, right?
Yep. It's one of the things that's going to put us on opposite ends of what we believe,
right?
And it's going to be this is the part that's kind of hard to understand, but the part that I realized on there, because people will look and say your position is not logical. Especially people on the left will look at Christianity and look at people who believe and say, well, you're just based on faith and emotion. Logic is not part of people of religious beliefs. You can't have logic. And it's like, no, logic is involved. You can start at a premise and move logically from that premise and get to where you are now. And the logical steps are correct. Your premise could be wrong, but you could still be operating on logic based on the premise that you see. And so you and I come from a different premise. Like what the premise we're taking is that there is an outside, giver of laws and giver of morality that we find that we cannot attain as human beings, but exists here. And from that premise, everything we do is logical.
Right.
But from the premise of from their premise, everything they're doing is logical. So there's not devoid of logic, unless you don't take the time, and most people don't take the time to be logical with their thoughts.
Right. Well, I struggle with a lot of their beliefs because, like, to me, like, I was like, how can you even possibly think that? Like on the abortion issue, for example, right? But a lot of people, I think you and I would agree, the abortion issue is black and white, but a lot of people say, oh, well, there's gray areas, right?
Well, no, it's black and white. It's black and white to them. It's just black and white from a different perspective. It comes down to autonomy versus life. And I believe you cannot have autonomy until you have life.
Right.
And they are from the position of autonomy is more important than life. And I can see some of the arguments that they present in that even after we die, we have autonomy over our body. We can say, I will be an organ donor or not be an organ donor. And what we say in life carries over, our autonomy carries over after life. And so that's why they believe autonomy is before life, and that a woman should have autonomy over herself. I agree with that, except as it affects another human being. And that human being never gets autonomy because their autonomy is taken from them by someone else. And so there's logical positions from both of those. It's just the starting point is different. And then being able to engage with a person who believes that side and be able to say, I get where you're coming from, but let me show you logically why I feel that is not the correct answer. Because I'm still going to argue with them. I don't think that they're right. Even if I understand where they're from, doesn't mean I agree with them. I'm still going to debate that. And I'm still going to try to present, but I'm going to present it from their perspective. And I think that's what we miss a lot by being in our echo chambers, is that we do not engage people on the outside of our echo chambers from the perspective of seeing their side, and to be able to say, I understand how you think. Let me show you in the way that you understand. Let me show you how you might be mistaken.
Yeah.
And if they have any intellectual honesty at all, they can receive that. I have received it from the other side. There have been times in the years across where, the person's presented an argument. I'm like, I don't actually have an answer for that. So I cannot properly engage in that. And I need to check myself to see, am I standing in the right spot here? And I can look back in certain things. If it's biblical, I'm going to stand on the Bible, excuse me, but it's also going to be logical. It's going to make sense, because God is not illogical. God is logic. It's just God's logic goes beyond our understanding, so that we can understand up to this level of what God is doing. And then we have to have faith that what he's doing is logical after that, even though it doesn't make sense to us. We're incapable of understanding his logic beyond a certain point. So that's where faith comes in. But it's not all just God says this or this or this or this. It's not random. God is not random. God is not emotional. It's logical, and everything actually makes sense as far as humans can make sense.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that Tom always says that I love is there's usually a lot more that we agree on than what we disagree on.
Yep.
And every single time everyone wants to major on the minors is like, and maybe they're not always minors, like abortion. I wouldn't consider that a minor, right? But they want to look at, well, what do we disagree with? And let's argue about that. And each side is speaking their own camp, and they're not really making a difference with the other one. Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. If I can challenge, anybody who's watching this, or anybody, the point that I believe Marshall and I both are trying to make in this show is to get out of your echo chamber. All right. It's dangerous when people live in an echo chamber. Now, my wife and I, when we got married 26 years ago last week, we decided we did not want to have a television in our house. So, I mean, we liked watching movies and stuff like that. So we had a screen and stuff like that, but we didn't have an antenna. We didn't have cable channels. We didn't have anything coming into our house that we didn't control. We chose which movies, when our kids were born and then growing up, we chose what they were going to watch. We weren't inundated with commercials and all that kind of stuff that we couldn't control. We controlled what our kids viewed and what brought in. But what it also did is that we weren't connected all the time to the news. We weren't, the news wasn't on all the time. And I think that is such a dangerous place to be, is to whatever news channel, if you agree, especially if you agree with what the news is telling you all the time, and you're constantly letting that be fed into you. I think that's dangerous. I think it's dangerous if you're constantly in an echo chamber and only hearing one side.
Well, I don't know how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole talking about news, but like they've come out and said it themselves. The news has been controlled by the CIA for a long time, longer than you and I have been
Conspiracy
alive. No, it's not. With the CIA has admitted it was a conspiracy. It was a true conspiracy for decades. But when they come out and say, yeah, that is true.
Yeah,
it's not a conspiracy. So
was that I saw that funny meme, even though I don't like memes. I think it was a funny meme where it said, who said it? It was there was an actor that said it. And I can't think of who the actor was right now, but he said, I no longer want to be called a conspiracy theorist. I want to identify as the person who was right all along.
Right. But I mean, so like, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, like there's no point. There's almost no point in watching news, because you just know what unless you're going to like independent news, so away from the mainstream either side. But I know that's not the point of our conversation.
Right, but either way, whatever way you go, make sure you're also not going so far that you're not hearing what the other side is saying. Right. I think it's important to constantly hear that, and I think it's important to reject. When people are just presenting one side. When you realize that this is a person that just projects one side, I think you should actively not follow them. Like, hear them every once in a while, but if they're only presenting one side, they're only presenting it from one perspective, and it happens to be the perspective that you agree with, then find something else to add in there. And I think that's that. You look at a lot of these talk shows that are comedy shows, and a lot of young people nowadays, they get their news from these comedians, and these comedians, it's not their job. It's not the comedian's job to tell you the truth. It's
Right.
the comedian's job to make money by making you laugh.
Right.
And it's easy to make you laugh when they can poke fun at the person you don't like. And so most of the jokes, it's one of the most used logical fallacies. It's called the straw man argument. You know what the straw man argument is?
I've heard the term many times, but go ahead and
The straw man argument is where you set up a fake, like a straw man, like a scarecrow, an entity that has no substance. You set it up and say, this is what the opponent believes. And then you set it on fire because it's easy, because it's not actually what they believe. You say, this is a representation of what they believe, and look how stupid that is, when it's not actually an actual accurate representation of what they believe. But if I can set up that straw man and say, look how dumb that is, and tear it down to my audience, and my audience who already agrees with me, like, yeah, they think they're getting information. They think they're gaining knowledge. The audience is saying, that's right, those people are dumb because they believe that. And the comedian is getting laughs and getting, air numbers, and their numbers are going up. So everything, when you're watching a comedian and they're making a joke and they're poking fun at the other side, every joke they're making is a straw man argument. Every joke they're making is a straw man argument. And if you are getting your source of information from watching these comedians, you are being actively misinformed. And it happens on both sides, but most of what we see in mainstream media, most of what we see in what we consider the media, is from the left. I mean, it's very difficult to find any right-leaning comedians who have a talk show,
right.
A late night talk show, and that's where a lot of people feel like they're getting their news, and it's not news. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So I wanted to kind of get your perspective, because I feel that the show that Marshall and I are doing, I feel that it has an importance as setting an example.
I think it has an importance in 511 as setting an example, right? Because you're showing two different sides of an argument. Both now it's not always that you guys are entirely in opposition.
That's true.
His position has kind of changed over the years from what I've gathered from watching the show, but it's been interesting because watching, at least hearing him talk, he's presenting it in a way, and like you said, there is a logic behind it.
Yep.
Right. And I think it's important to take a minute to understand, because like as Christians, if we're going to minister to people, we're not just going to minister to the people that are already sitting in the pew. Like, I mean, we do a lot of times, but we shouldn't be, right? Because God, the Bible says, go out into the world and make disciples. He didn't say, talk in the church to the people that are already disciples and only talk to them.
Yeah. Make disciples of all nations, not just keep talking to you, and not just keep talking to your own disciples, but make disciples of all nations. But it brings me to part of this conversation that you and I were talking about a little bit before the show, in Christian media, Christian movies, Christian filmmaking. And it's kind of funny. I have always been turned off by Christian filmmaking and Christian media. What is it? The Hallmark Channel, effectively, even though it's not necessarily Christian content, it's still like that schmaltzy, like, what was that? It was a joke, says, what has 3 writers, 4 actors, 27 locations, and the same plot.
Hallmark Channel.
Every Hallmark Channel, every Christian movie, right? And so but you look at something, and every time I'm making content, when I was making the Star Wars videos and lightsaber videos that was going to go out to the public, my thinking was, how is someone who doesn't believe what I believe, how are they going to view this? And even it was really cool back several years ago when Marshall and I first started a podcast a few years ago. I was just starting to get in, being on the speaking team at the church. So I was getting to speak at church for services and preaching the message. And I was inviting him, say, hey, maybe you wouldn't normally come to church, but would you come if your friend was preaching? And so he came a few times, and it really made me look at the message and say, I'm preaching to these people, but what is a non-Christian going to think of this message? Because shouldn't this also be taking into account? Shouldn't this message be taking into account how is a non-believer hearing this? And I want to make sure I'm presenting the gospel in a way that's like, yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, God makes sense. And I'm not just preaching to the crowd to get amens. I want to preach to the people who don't believe and say, this is why you should. And I feel like when I was making my films, I was always looking at, how is somebody who doesn't believe in Christ, how are they going to view this? And is it going to win them over?
Well, There was a certain movie we talked about, and I won't say the name.
Yeah.
You can say the name if you want, but that we talked about that I think most people think, oh, that's the epitome of like typical Christian movies.
Yes.
And like you and I both are in agreement, like, yeah, that movie is terrible. But it was really successful. So many perspectives, right? Well, it was really successful because they're selling to the choir.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's like, and this is something that I find, and I don't mind mentioning names and you know, but they made the media, they put it out there, and it was really popular. But I want to contrast two of them. You know, the one that we were talking about is God's Not Dead. You know, and I feel like if you were an atheist watching that movie, how would you feel that the Christians made you the bad guy?
Uh-huh.
And the Christians said, we need to kill the atheists and threaten their life so that they find God, because that's the only way they're going to find God. Like, how would an atheist feel watching that film? And it's like, you know, they were making the film for Christians to go, yay,
right?
Not necessarily making a gospel oriented film. And I get that. And I suppose there's a place for that, but I contrast that to what I feel is actually a really good, storytelling is The Chosen.
Mm-hmm.
I think I haven't
seen it, but everyone I talk to, including my wife and kids, love it. I've never seen it.
I was expecting Christian filmmaking. Christianese. I was expecting. I resisted it for a long time. Like, okay, The Chosen. Okay,
yeah.
And I was expecting it to be that. And finally, like a year ago, my wife and I said, after the 3 seasons of it, well, I go, let's go ahead and watch it. It was on Amazon Prime, and we have that. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it caught me. 3 episodes. I'm like, this is good storytelling. Mm-hmm. This is quality storytelling, and still has a really good message. And I can see it as a non-Christian watching it going, I could believe in Jesus.
Well, if you start to look at, and I think that we are making a kind of turning a corner on that, because like you look at what Angel Studio is doing,
mm-hmm.
and so I know you go watch it. You'll love the movies.
Yeah.
But The Sound of Freedom was a phenomenal movie. I think you might only want to watch it once because it's like makes you angry.
Yeah.
But it's a very well done movie. And then I don't know that you would necessarily say it's a Christian movie, but it has a Christian message in it. Right. And then you go to Sound of Hope, which I would say very strongly has a Christian message in it. We just watched that. It's not even released yet. It's releasing on the 4th of July. If you guys get a chance, go check it out. I would think you'll love it. But we saw a screening of it back in DC last weekend, and a phenomenal movie. And that's one that you might want to watch a few times.
Yeah.
But because they're making a point to tell the story well first before they try to just interject, hitting you over the head with the Bible.
Now, here's what's funny is that this has long been a Christian filmmaking problem for many, many years, many decades, really, going back to like the 70s, the movies about the tribulation, or those mm-hmm. Thief in the Night, and going way back.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, it's like we are making this content with this message, and we want the people who believe in this message to cheer it on and buy it. And the quality of the filmmaking isn't necessarily what they were focusing on, and that's always
those movies were terrible.
Yeah, and it's always been kind of a thing in Christian films, because the message was more important than the quality of the film. People will overlook the quality of the film if they believe in the message.
But I think reality is the message maybe is more important, but
nobody will hear it if you don't tell the story
exactly.
Right. And so what's funny is to see this happening to Hollywood now. What's funny is to see what wokeism has done to Hollywood, to that now there are movies coming out, Disney Plus, just going to call you out on that. There are movies coming out, TV shows that are coming out, that the intent of the show is to push a certain message, and they're making the same mistake that Christian movies made for decades, which is, oh, we're preaching to our own choir. They will cheer for us.
Except for there is no choir.
Right. They'll cheer for us. And they'll like it because of the message, even though the quality of the show has, and the quality of so much movies and TV shows.
They've destroyed a lot of franchises.
They've destroyed a lot of good franchises with just bad storytelling.
Yeah.
And just because being in their echo
message,
chamber.
Indoctrination was more important.
Yeah.
Which going back to what you were saying about the Christian films, the indoctrination was more important.
Yes.
Right. In the same regard. Right?
And the idea is, if you take your time, and this we're bringing back because we're coming up on 30 minutes here, bringing it back to what we talked about in Hollywood and in yourself and what's happening, what we're trying to do with this podcast is, if you do a good job, if you are honest and just do a good storytelling, just honestly engage with the person next to you. Forget about the memes, forget about the winning the argument, forget about just trying to be victorious. Just be honest and tell a good story and be honest in your communication. Your point will get across more effectively. And I believe that that's what this show is trying to do, that we are trying to get this point across, to communicate honestly, listen honestly to the people who are on the other side of the fence, the other people, the bad guys, whatever everybody's trying to tell you, the them, engage with the them.
Right.
Engage with them and engage honestly. And that's what the show is.
I think
really
if
about.
I was to sum up in my vocabulary, what you just said was, let's make a point to care more about understanding and being understood than trying to win a fight.
And on that note, I think that's a good ending for this. Marshall and I will be back next week.
We miss you, Marshall.
We miss you, Marshall. Hope you're doing well. But we're going to be continuing our talk on capitalism and communism. We intend to finish that discussion, our part 2 of our discussion. Thank you for joining us today on United Opposition. Thank you for Covenant Coffee for supporting 511 Media. Yep. And we will catch you guys next week. God bless.
Have a great day. God bless.